The narcotic of an unsuspected influence was acting upon her, and her perceptions were benumbed. She did not know she was dying. She thought she was in love. But welcome back to the Dark Archives. I am the chronicler. Tonight's entry is Carmilla, Part 2, the continuation of Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 novella. When we last closed the record, a young woman named Laura had woken screaming in her locked room, seen a dark female figure standing motionless at the foot of her bed, silent, breathless, casting no shadow, and watched it pass through a door that she then found secured from the inside. Carmilla, her beautiful house guest, had no explanation. Carmilla was deeply sympathetic. Carmilla suggested the charm from the mountebank was the answer, and Laura, who was already beginning to fail, believed her. Part 2 is where Le Fanu's architecture becomes fully visible, and it is a precise and merciless thing to observe. Two separate stories are moving toward each other on the same road. In the Schloss, Laura's health deteriorates in ways she cannot name and will not report. In a neighboring estate, an old soldier named General Spielsdorf has just watched a girl he loved die in the same way, and he is riding to Karnstein with an axe and a purpose. The moment these two stories meet, something that has hidden for 150 years will finally have no more shadows to step into. There is also a portrait, uncrated from Graz, cleaned of a century and a half of grime. It bears the name Mircalla, Countess Karnstein, and the date 1698. The face in it is one you have already met. Le Fanu places this revelation quietly, almost offhandedly, in the middle of a domestic scene. He knew that the most devastating disclosures are the ones delivered without ceremony. The archive has filed this entry under convergence. The record continues. The horror of that night did not diminish with morning. It seemed to deepen with time, and communicated itself to the room and the very furniture that had encompassed the apparition. I could not bear to be alone for a moment. I told Madame Perrodon and Mademoiselle de La Fontaine what lay so heavy at my heart. Mademoiselle laughed, but I fancied Madame looked anxious. "By the by," said Mademoiselle, "the long lime-tree walk behind Carmilla's bedroom window is haunted. Martin says he came up twice before sunrise and saw the same female figure walking down the avenue." I said she must not mention it to Carmilla, who could see down that walk from her room and was, if possible, a greater coward than I. When Carmilla came down that morning, she spoke first. "I was so frightened last night," she said. "I had a dream of something black coming round my bed. I awoke in a perfect horror. I really thought for some seconds I saw a dark figure near the chimney-piece, but I felt under my pillow for my charm, and the moment my fingers touched it, the figure disappeared." I told her my own adventure, at the recital of which she appeared horrified. She urged me earnestly to pin the charm to my pillow that night. I did so, and slept profoundly, and woke with a lassitude and melancholy that weighed upon me all day. I felt myself a changed girl. A strange melancholy was stealing over me, a melancholy that I would not have interrupted. Dim thoughts of death began to open, and an idea that I was slowly sinking took gentle, and somehow not unwelcome, possession of me. Carmilla became more devoted to me than ever, and her strange paroxysms of languid adoration more frequent. She used to gloat on me with increasing ardor, the more my strength and spirits waned. This always shocked me, like a momentary glare of insanity. Without knowing it, I was now in a pretty advanced stage of the strangest illness under which mortal ever suffered. Certain vague and strange sensations visited me in my sleep. A pleasant, peculiar, cold thrill, as of moving against the current of a river. Then dreams, interminable and vague, leaving only the impression of having been in a dark place, speaking to people I could not see. And then a sensation as if warm lips kissed me, longer and more lovingly as they reached my throat. But there the caress fixed itself. My heart beat faster. My breathing rose and fell rapidly. A sobbing that rose into strangulation supervened, and turned into a dreadful convulsion in which my senses left me and I became unconscious. It was now 3 weeks since the commencement of this state. I had grown pale, my eyes dilated and darkened underneath. I would not admit I was ill. I would not tell my father. The narcotic of an unsuspected influence was acting upon me, and my perceptions were benumbed. One night, instead of the voice I was accustomed to hear in the dark, I heard one sweet and tender and at the same time terrible, which said, "Your mother warns you to beware of the assassin." At the same moment a light sprang up, and I saw Carmilla standing near the foot of my bed in her white nightdress, bathed from her chin to her feet in one great stain of blood. I wakened with a shriek. I remember springing from my bed, and my next recollection is of standing on the lobby crying for help. We knocked at Carmilla's door. We pounded. We shrieked her name, all in vain. We forced the lock and stood holding our lights aloft in the doorway. The room was undisturbed. Everything was exactly as I had left it on bidding her good night. But Carmilla was gone. The whole household searched the castle through the following morning. Not a trace. The stream was about to be dragged. My father was in distraction. And then, at 1 o'clock, I ran up to Carmilla's room on an impulse, and found her standing at her dressing table, beckoning me with her pretty finger in silence, her face expressing extreme fear. She had woken, she said, on the sofa of the inner dressing room, with both doors forced. No memory of having left her bed, no explanation for how she had passed through 2 locks that the servants had watched until morning. My father proposed somnambulism. My father laughed. I watched Carmilla's dark eyes follow him as he paced the room, a sly, slow glance that lasted precisely as long as she thought no one was looking. That same afternoon arrived the dark-faced son of the picture cleaner from Graz, with 2 large packing cases of restored portraits. Many of these pictures had come to us through my mother, who was of the old Hungarian family of Karnstein. The pictures were brought to light one by one. Then one was produced with particular pride, small, about 1.5 feet high, without a frame, the cleaning having revealed it entirely. It was quite beautiful. It was startling. It seemed to live. It was the effigy of Carmilla. "Carmilla, dear," I exclaimed. "Here is an absolute miracle. Here you are, living, smiling, ready to speak in this picture." The name in the corner, read clearly now, was not Marcia, as my father had first thought, but Mircalla, Countess Karnstein, and the date, A.D. 1698. "I am descended from the Karnsteins," I said. "That is, Mamma was." And Carmilla smiled, languid and radiant, gazing at me from across the room, and said only, "How interesting." That night, in the drawing room, we played cards pleasantly, and I accompanied Carmilla as usual to her room. She said to me, with a seriousness she did not always permit herself, "I am under vows, no none half so awfully, and I dare not tell my story yet, even to you. But the time is very near when you shall know everything. You must come with me, loving me to death. or else hate me and still come with me, and hating me through death and after. There is no such word as indifference in my apathetic nature. She sank back on her pillow with her glittering eyes following me as I withdrew to the door. Love will have its sacrifices, she whispered to the air. No sacrifice without blood. I bid her good night and crept from the room with an uncomfortable sensation that did not leave me until morning, by which time, in fact, it had only deepened. Sigardo had summoned the doctor without telling me. He was the grave little physician with white hair and spectacles. I told him my story, and as I proceeded, he grew graver. He examined me and showed my father a small blue spot below my throat, about the size of the tip of a little finger. God bless me. So it is, exclaimed my father, growing pale. You see it now with your own eyes, said the doctor with a gloomy triumph. The doctor instructed that I was not to be alone for a single moment. He and my father paced the grounds afterward in earnest conversation I could not hear. Two men who understood something and were afraid of it, and would not yet say what it was. A letter arrived from General Spielsdorf. My father looked as if he wished a general at the bottom of the Red Sea. He said only, "You shall know all about it in a day or two." Then he ordered the carriage. We were going, he said, to the ruins of Karnstein. The drive was beautiful. Winding roads through soft wooded hills, the ground breaking into hollows and gentle rises. At one of those turns we came suddenly face to face with General Spielsdorf riding toward us. It was 10 months since we had seen him, and that time had done the work of years. He had grown thinner. Something of gloom and bitter anger had replaced the cordial serenity I remembered in his features. His dark blue eyes gleamed with a sterner light from under shaggy grey brows. He joined us in the carriage, and had barely settled before he began, with his usual soldierly directness, to speak of the bereavement he had sustained in the death of his beloved ward, and then broke out in a tone of intense fury against the hellish arts to which he had fallen victim. "I have been made the dupe of a preternatural conspiracy," he said. "I have strange things to tell you, such as I myself would have scouted as incredible a few months since." The general's story began at a magnificent masquerade, held at Count Karlsfeld's Schloss in honor of the Grand Duke Charles. The grounds thrown open, the trees hung with colored lamps, fireworks that Paris itself had never witnessed, the finest musicians in Europe drifting from behind groves and boats on the lake. His ward, Bertha, was radiant that night. He noticed a young lady, magnificently dressed, masked, watching Bertha with extraordinary and particular interest. The young lady introduced herself to Bertha as Milaka, the daughter of an old acquaintance, and was witty and charming and deeply engaging. And when at last she lowered her mask, she displayed a remarkably beautiful face that Bertha had never seen before, and immediately could not do without. The elder lady, also masked, of commanding air, engaged the general himself in conversation, demonstrating an uncanny knowledge of events from his past life, and then declared she must depart urgently on a matter of life and death, and asked, with the manner of one conferring a favor rather than requesting one, that he take charge of her daughter during her absence. His ward entreated him. The beautiful face determined him. "Quite overpowered," he said. "I submitted and undertook too easily the care of the young lady whom her mother called Milaka." The mother's carriage vanished into the night, and Milaka came home with them. There soon appeared drawbacks. Milaka complained of extreme languor and never left her room until late afternoon. She was discovered to be absent from that room, door locked on the inside, in the very early morning, seen walking through the trees in an easterly direction, looking like a person in a trance. And then his ward, Bertha, began to lose her looks and health in a manner mysterious and horrible. She was visited first by appalling dreams, then by a spectre that sometimes resembled Millarca and sometimes a beast, walking round the foot of her bed. Then came the sensation of an icy stream against her breast, then something like 2 needles piercing her below the throat, then the convulsive sense of strangulation, then unconsciousness. The physicians were baffled. The doctor from Graz said he could not be mistaken. No natural disease exhibited these symptoms, and death was already very near. He left a sealed letter. Open it only in the presence of a clergyman. The general read it alone. It told him his ward was suffering the visits of a vampire. That night, hiding in the dark dressing room with his sword, he watched through the crevice until he saw a large black object crawl over the foot of the bed and swiftly spread itself to Bertha's throat, where it swelled into a great, palpitating mass. He sprang forward. The creature contracted, slid to the floor, and he saw Millarca. He struck at her with his sword. She stood unscathed by the door. He struck again. She was gone. His sword flew to shivers against the wood, and before morning dawned, Bertha was dead. By this time our carriage had reached the roofless chimneys and gables of the ruined village and the towers of the dismantled castle of Karnstein. We descended in silence and made our way up through the spacious chambers and dark corridors to the chapel below. The general seated me on a block of timber within the chapel walls and called to a woodman clearing growth from the old stones. The woodman could not identify the monuments, but directed us to a forest ranger who knew every Karnstein tomb. While we waited, my father asked how the village had come to be deserted. It was troubled by revenants, sir, the woodman said. Many graves opened, many vampires staked and beheaded and burned. But the village was not relieved until a Moravian nobleman passed through who knew such affairs. He watched from the chapel tower at moonrise until he saw a vampire leave its grave, then lured it back to the battlements and split its skull. This nobleman had also been given authority to remove the tomb of Mircalla, Countess Karnstein, which he did so effectually, but in a little while its very site was forgotten. Not a soul living, the woodman said, could tell you where it stood. He dropped his axe and left. And in the silence of the ruined chapel, as the general gathered himself to close his terrible story, I heard Madame's voice and Carmilla's approaching from beyond the archway. I looked up, and through the Gothic doorway, under its carved grotesques, I saw Carmilla enter the shadow of the chapel. I was about to rise and speak. I nodded and smiled, and then, with a cry, the general caught up the woodman's hatchet and started forward. On seeing him, a brutalized change came over Carmilla's features, an instantaneous and horrible transformation, crouching, savage. She dived beneath his blow, caught his wrist in her tiny grasp with a strength of forged steel, and the axe fell to the ground. He staggered against the wall, and the girl was gone. Madame stood in the passage, insisting that Carmilla had not passed her. The general looked at me with eyes still bright with terror. "That is Millarca," he said. "That is the same person who long ago was called Mircalla, Countess Karnstein. Depart from this accursed ground, my poor child, as quickly as you can. You will not find her here." The record is suspended. Part 2 of 3. She has been called 3 names. She has been wearing the same face for 150 years, and she is, at this moment, gone, which is not the same as destroyed. If you have stayed with the archive this far, subscribe to the Dark Archives. Part 3 will require you. Every darkness deserves a witness. What remains is the vault, the opened coffin, the face that time has not touched, and the question the archive has been building toward since the first entry. What does it take to end something that has refused to end for a century and a half? Until next time, the archives remain open.